The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show with me, Charles Christian. Thank you so much for tuning in again, and let's get right on with the show because we've got a lot to squeeze in. We're going all popular culture this week with James Bond movie and urban fantasy novelist-themed interviews. First off, you may have spotted newspaper reports a few days ago reporting that the radiotimes.com had run a poll asking people who was their favourite James Bond actor. And the winner, by a mile, was Sean Connery, the original James Bond, followed, perhaps surprisingly, by Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan. Which is kind of fortunate because when we interviewed pop culture expert Arlen Schumer last month, along with the piece on the Twilight Zone, which we ran in show 123, we also recorded Arlen holding forth on why Sean Connery and the first 4 James Bond movies are the absolute best. Here's Arlen.
My mother took my brother and I to see Dr. No at a drive-in movie theater in New Jersey where I grew up. And I had to be somewhere around 5 years old. No father. And who do I see up on that giant screen? My first cinematic memory is Sean Connery and Dr. No. Remember at the end, he's crawling through those giant tubes that were feeding the hot water for the nuclear reactor?
Yep.
Well, I remember those images. Connery was in a ripped T-shirt, and, you know, his hair was wet because of the hot water. That's my first male cinematic, like, father figure image. So, gee, what a shock. I became a total James Bond Connery fan. And, you know, I'm a little younger than you, so I didn't get to see the other movies from Rush with Love and Goldfinger in the movie theater. But I did see From Rush with Love in summer camp. Whenever it rained, they would show a movie. So I saw From Rush with Love. I was like 6 years old. And, you know, one of my early movie memories. And then I was old enough to see Thunderball, the 4th Connery movie, in the movie theater when it debuted in late December of '65. And I remember that as being the first movie memory of lines around the block. Yeah. A blockbuster kind of 60s movie, and that's ingrained in my mind. But 2 years later, You Only Live Twice came out, and when I look back at it now, I mean, I saw it then, but to me, the first 4 films are the canon, as I call them, because starting with I Feel You Only Live Twice, and listen, Bond aficionados, just like, again, on Facebook, there's a bunch of Bond groups I'm a part of. We're still debating all of these movies. And was Thunderball good? Was it not? You know, everybody has an opinion, and there are detractors and fans. But I will say from all of my years of loving and following Bond, and by the way, for me, it's only Connery. I don't accept any of the actors post-Connery. I kind of like Timothy Dalton. I thought he was the closest in his look to Connery. But I dismiss every other Bond, including Daniel Craig. To me, it's only Sean Connery. That's it. Mm-hmm. These other guys, they might as well be other characters, but they're not James Bond. To me, there's very few. It's just like in comics. There are certain characters who have only been done definitively by their original artists.
Yes.
Other artists might have drawn them, but there's something about certain characters, you know, Swamp Thing, which has been made into movies and TV shows. He was originally drawn by one of the great horror comics artists of all time, Bernie Wrightson, who ended up doing behind-the-scenes work for films all through the 80s and 90s before he passed away a few years ago. But he was the definitive artist on Swamp Thing. Nobody else has drawn him better. And there's certain creations like that. And I think in film, there's very few actors that have been so wedded to a specific role that they played. I mean, when you look at the John Waynes, they played types, the Western hero. But Humphrey Bogart played a type, but there wasn't a specific role, although probably nobody can imagine, the guy from Casablanca as anybody but Bogart. But my point is, Connery was so wedded to the Bond role, and those movies are so brilliant, those first four. They're of their time, but just like Twilight Zone, they're timeless as well. They're the very first postmodern action what we call action movies. And I'm not just talking about Connery's little comedic quips that everybody from Arnold Schwarzenegger on down has tried to imitate. Nobody's done it better than Connery. Are you kidding me? You know those quips?
Yep.
My favorite one is from Thunderball, where he's dancing with what her name is, Fiona Volpe or whatever her name is, the red-haired villainess. And there's guys with guns on the perimeter of the dance floor that are about to shoot Bond while he's dancing with her. And then, of course, he sees the reflection or whatever he does. He sees the gun at the last second. Beautifully edited and choreographed scene by the great Bond director, Terrence Young. And, of course, she takes the bullet in the back and kills her. So Connery, Bond, he's middle of the dance floor holding her up, and she's dead. So he brings her to a side table and puts her down. But there's a couple sitting there at the table. And he goes, and I think I'm quoting this somewhat correctly, he goes, do you mind if my partner sits this one out? She's just dead. I mean, there are so many great – but my point is I'm talking about the films as what they are our first modern action films, and nobody has done them better. Dr. No alone, the last 40 minutes when he gets to the underground island and all of that Ken Adam production design and the idea of the secret lair being blown up at the end, all the conventions of the modern kind of secret agent action movie are all there in Dr. No. Yeah. But the style of the filmmaking, the quick cutting, the fight scenes, Connery himself, before him, the dark-haired leading man was Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
When you think of Connery and his athleticism, but, he got the role because he moved like a cat. For a big man, he was well-built but not muscle-bound, but a well-built leading man. The right height, Connery was perfect. But he got the role because when he walked across the parking lot after meeting with the producer Saltzman and Broccoli in probably 1961 or something, they said when they saw him walking across the parking lot, they said he moved like a cat. And when you think of Bond, Connery moving in those first four films, think about that. That's just part of what we love about him without even maybe articulating it. But they articulated it. That's how come I know about that particular quote. But my point is the movies themselves, the use of the music, the graphic opening, which had never been done before with that, the
iris, yes.
Point. Yeah. The teaser sequence that begins with From Russia with Love, where you think it's Connery getting strangled by Robert Shaw, and then he pulls the mask off and, it's just a dummy there, which is the whole Mission Impossible concept in a nutshell. That's where Mission Impossible comes from. And, where it's always, they rip off the life mask and it's somebody else, But my point is all of the tropes of those first four films are the bedrock foundation of our modern action films. And while special effects and filmmaking styles, have all gotten slicker and better, those first four films stand up when you watch them today. They do not look dated. Yeah, there's some rear screen projection that you wish, even Hitchcock had some really terrible rear screen projection. I mean, think about Marnie, speaking of Sean Connery. Do you know those scenes where they're on horseback with that rear projection?
Yeah.
Horrible. But my point is, if you take away some of that, those movies still hold up. they're not spoofs of the spy genre. They are the spy genre.
Yeah.
Dr. No is a great spy movie. And then I said the last 45 minutes, it becomes this kind of quasi science fiction film, which is what makes the Bond movies so unique and so great. From Russia with Love, on the other hand, directed by the same director, Terrence Young, is almost Hitchcockian in its suspense. I mean, it even has an homage to North by Northwest, where Connery's being chased by the helicopter at the end.
Yeah.
But my point is, the movie pretty much ends when he kills Robert Shaw in maybe the greatest close quarters fight scene in movie history. Not just Bond history, movie history. You know the fight I'm talking about between Robert Shaw and Connery?
Yep. In
my webinar on the Bond movies on July 29th, I'm going to be showing clips from all of the first 4 films, and I'll be showing that fight scene. But you can't tell me that in the history of movies since From Russia with Love was made in 1963, there is a better close quarters fight scene than that between Connery and Robert Shaw in the train car, which, by the way, does not last that long. It's only a couple minutes.
Yeah.
But you watch it today on DVD, and you tell me, has anybody done it better?
Yeah. And that's another point. You say it only lasts a couple of minutes, but it's memorable, whereas a lot of fight scenes in modern movies, they go on just too long.
Less is more.
Yeah.
Again, today's action movies, there's the cliche about an explosion every couple minutes. You look at Dr. No, like I said, the first 3/4 of the movie, it moves at a fairly, compared to the pace I just described.
Yeah.
It's a slow moving movie.
Yeah.
And yet it was about pacing. It was about peaks and valleys. That's what great storytelling is about. And, I keep coming back to the director, Terrence Young, but while he did not do Goldfinger, he did come back for Thunderball. And when you think of, and then he never directed a Bond movie after that, which I'll never know the reason why, but those 3 movies that Terrence Young did, Dr. No, From Russia, and Thunderball, might be the 3 greatest Bond movies, although everybody loves Goldfinger too. But it's hard to pick because each of those first 4 films, the reason why I call them the canon, is because they all have flaws. They're not perfect films, but they all have things in them that are not only brilliant and great, but there are things in each movie that none of the other movies have. So when you try to say, is Goldfinger better than Thunderball? Is From Russia with Love better than Dr. No? You can't really say one is better than the other because each one of them has something unique. I mean, take Dr. No. Dr. No himself with those metal hands. I mean, he doesn't get enough credit as excuse me, being the great Bond villain that he is. Everybody talks about Goldfinger and Odd Job. I think the villain in Thunderball is underrated. And I think From Russia with Love, I think Robert Shaw is underrated as one of the greatest Bond villains.
Yeah.
Because there was nobody that was as cold-bloodedly vicious as the way they portrayed Shaw. And his physical prowess and his greatness as an actor. We all know the kind of actor he became. That was one of his earliest roles in From Russia with Love. But my point is, when he finally squares off in that train car between him and Connery Bond, I mean, the way they built up Shaw's character over the course of the film, you really were invested in that fight because you knew that the Shaw character was just incredibly murderous and vicious and evil.
Yeah.
And, you can't really say that about some other Bond villains. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But again, each villain in each of those first 4 films is unique. And each of the films has things that the other one doesn't have. From Russia with Love, closest to the Ian Fleming novel of those first 4. And like I said, it's the only one you can describe as Hitchcockian. Goldfinger, of course, has the great Goldfinger Odd Job duo. There's never been another Odd Job. He's totally unique. There are things in Goldfinger, again, that you don't see in any of the other films. And yet it's got a few flaws as well. And then Thunderball, you know, some fans don't like the underwater footage. They say it's too slow moving. And then other fans, we love Bond underwater. You know, that fight scene at the end between all of the orange-suited divers and the black-suited bad guys underwater with the music by John Barry. I mean, the spectacle, if you saw it on the big screen, there was never anything like that.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
And what about those urban fantasy novels, you ask? Well, in our Weird Times newsletter, the latest one went out last week, we recently ran a survey asking readers to name their favourite urban fantasy authors, and the winner, by a mile again, and actually got 75% of the votes, was Ben Aaronovitch with his Rivers of London / Peter Grant series. Now, it just so happens that 3 years ago I interviewed Ben, who is also a former Doctor Who scriptwriter, at a British Fantasy Society FantasyCon event. Here's that interview again, as it was recorded before we started the current Weird Tales radio show series.
You've got a new book out on the Rivers of London series, and
novella.
And more about that later, but according to Wikipedia, so it must be true, the first book in the series won you a New Writer Award in 2011, which is slightly odd because you first crossed everybody's radar 20 years ago. Before then,
I didn't win it.
You didn't win it?
No.
Oh, you were nominated for it?
No, it was the Cadbury Award. It was the Galaxy Book Award.
It's something to do with chocolate.
It was the worst organised award ceremony in the history of award ceremonies. And even if they were to offer me a large amount of money, I'm not going back to them because they're horrible.
But going back to your first writing gig...
Well, actually, I would go back if they offered me a large sum of money.
How did you get...
I should make that clear. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, not at all. We're here to listen to you. You started writing for Doctor Who at the age of 25. 23.
Yes.
How did you get the gig?
Well, right. Well, I wanted to be a scriptwriter.
Yeah.
And someone gave me a good piece of advice. I can't remember who it was now. And they said basically what you do is, in those days, script editors had a lot more power than they do now. They were actually important people as opposed to rubber stamps for producers. And knew their craft, and it was a step. The actual career ladder was script editor, producer, and it meant something. And so you would look at a script editor on television. Remember, this is back when there was no video, so you had to actually watch television and make a note like this. So it went up the screen, and you found people that you liked, and then you wrote a spec script, and you sent it directly to them. Mm-hmm. And it was always very important to have a name on the script, so it went to someone.
Yeah.
And that the script... See, in those days, it was the first days of computers, so these people would get a lot of scripts written on crayon. I'm not kidding. You should have seen the Doctor Who slush pile. It was fantastic. But, so I went to my local print shop and actually had it printed out properly and bound. Well, I'm sorry about that. It's the Diet Coke. And I sent it in and to a lady called Caroline Alton, and she picked it up and she liked it, and she said she had me in for an interview at Threshold House, which was where actually all the drama was actually put together. And I said, "What do you like?" And I said, "Well, I like science fiction and crime." You see, anyone who's read my stuff will find that amazingly unsurprising. And she said, "Well, write something for Doctor Who and write something for Rockcliffe Babies," which was, the only science fiction on, and at that time, possibly the only crime series on. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and had Rockcliffe Babies gone for another series, I would have written one for them as well. But as it is, Doctor Who did go on, and Andrew Cartmel liked my spec script. And one day he phoned me up and said, "We'd like you to write the Dalek story." Mm-hmm. This was after lots of discussions and me handing in ideas and talking to John and things like that. So,
yeah. How much control did they have over you in your writing? Because I mean, the remembrance of the Daleks, it's got the cliffhanger at the end of the first episode where the Dalek suddenly levitates.
Oh, well, that was the only thing we knew was definitely going to happen.
Oh, right. Because, I mean, you single-handedly destroyed 20 years of schoolboy jokes about, you can run away from Daleks by climbing stairs.
What happened was, John Nathan Turner had all the surviving episodes as VHSs in his office. And that was back when you couldn't get them as VHSs. You just couldn't get Doctor Who as VHSs. So basically I just went, okay, in the interest of research, I will now take these all home. And I took them all home, and I essentially watched, it wasn't a complete 24 years of Doctor Who because there were quite a lot of missing episodes in the middle. Oh my God, those Hartnell episodes dragged. Wow, thank God you can fast forward. I mean, they were of their time, but they were there's a completely different style. You go back to that stuff, and there's people running on the spot in tiny little, obviously tiny little studios, while very bad super exposure goes on around them to imply that they're running through a jungle. And you can get away with that then. You can get away with it now, and you really couldn't get away with it now.
Yeah.
So I watched all that, and one thing I really noticed was that there's the whole Dalek going upstairs things. So when they asked me to do the Dalek story, there is a bit where Tom Baker says, if you're Master of the Universe, you follow me up this rope ladder. And I thought, all right, we're going to have to deal with that one. And so Remembrance of the Lights basically went like this, right? We want to do it in 1963 because it's the anniversary. It's not the anniversary story, but it's the anniversary season, right? So we'll go back to 1963. We want to have Daleks fighting each other because at that time the BBC were getting very shirty about the number of people being killed. So we thought, well, that way we can have lots of bangs and whistles, but it won't be people, it will be Daleks blowing up other Daleks, and so we can have exciting Dalek blowing up scenes. I'm going to have a Dalek go upstairs and I'm going to blow up Skaro. Mm-hmm. That was basically all that I knew. I knew there was going to be a funeral. So funeral, Skaro, stairs, Dalek factions, and that was it. And then they sent me away, and I went off and wrote it. Mm-hmm. And I was young and stupid, so I had no idea what I was doing. So I wrote it in that kind of blissful state of ignorance that you do for your first professional script, where you are a genius, I am a genius, and I will write this and it will be the best script ever. And strangely, it was quite good. I mean, I look at it now and go, oh, God.
It's still very highly rated by fans.
It's very highly rated, but I think fans are kind, to be totally honest. I mean, it's good. It's got its moments. I particularly like Ace yelling wimps out the window. Cheating Daleks is one of my favourite bits. And it's got its bits where I sit there and I just think you could have structured that so much better. But, I'm proud of it, And John left all the control up to Andrew, really, except to say, you can't afford that. There was one point where they said, we can have a Dalek's weapon platform, or you can have the windows blowing in on the school. Pick one. And I went, and I thought, they're more likely to do the windows blowing in better than they're going to do a Dalek's weapons platform. So that's how the special weapons Dalek was born, for those of you that find that sort of thing exciting, was because I wanted because I'd just been to see, was it Master of the Universe?
Oh.
Was it, Castle Grayskull, the live action version with Dolph Lundgren.
Yes.
And what's his name turns up on a wonderful floating Grace. There's this wonderful weapons
he appears behind the
they come into our world, and like the portal opens, this wonderful thing of that floating weapons platform comes floating out, and I wanted something like that, which they would have done very badly. So it's probably just as well we got the special, who was wonderful, looked like a World War I tank, and was great, and suited the special effects team who were assigned to us, because they liked blowing things up, and they just went to town, and that was good.
I want to talk about your other Doctor Who series a little bit later on, but after you'd written Doctor Who, and obviously Doctor Who was cancelled in 1989, that series, you then went on to, again looking up, a huge range of different activities, including writing for Casualty, regular writer for the sci-fi series Jupiter Moons, and then various spin-off novels.
Well, if you look at my work very carefully, you'll see a pattern. What happens is I write Casualty, I write Jupiter Moon. That's the most productive, and making 1990 the most sort of productive period of my life. And
been all downhill since then.
And then it was downhill pretty much continuously all through the 90s to about 2009, when I thought, fuck this for Game of Soldiers, and wrote books instead.
Right.
So all that stuff is me desperately flailing around the bake stuff. It's all me desperately flailing around trying to kickstart my career, which was deader than a dead thing that had got very dead.
Why do you think
and then
that?
Shot.
I mean, was it because you were?
Well, I don't think that. I know
associated
that.
with Doctor Who.
No, I don't
Doctor
know.
Who
You
being rubbish.
never find out why that happens.
Yeah.
You never find out why that happens. No one ever comes up to you and says, "I'm sorry, your career as a scriptwriter is over. Please pick." You know, you don't go out with a box. No one gives you a box with your stuff in to go out there. You do just as many meetings. It's just you get to a point where you go, "I haven't been paid in 5 years." Maybe there's a reason for that. You know, you do lots of development meetings. You go and talk to people.
Yeah.
You get gibboned a lot, you know, you propose things, you get assigned to things, you write spec scripts, and you just realise you're not being paid and you've gone bankrupt. Oh, I've gone bankrupt! I'm forced to work in Waterstones.
Were you?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, at gunpoint, actually. Literally, someone from Waterstones came around with a gun and said, "You will work." No, I basically implied, you can see why I'm a writer, can't you? There's no real situation that I won't embellish if I think I can get away with it. I basically thought, right, I've got no qualifications. I didn't have a degree. I don't have any A levels, and my O levels weren't really that impressive. So I thought, and my experience, of course, was not working for television. So, which is, well, right, please list your experience not working for television. So I basically thought, I'm going to end up in retail, aren't I? And I thought, what's the least worst kind of retail? And I thought, well, bookshops is going to be the least worst kind of retail. I mean, like, if you're going to do that compared to stacking shelves in Tesco's, bookselling is, like, much better. So I applied to every single Waterstones along the length of the 24 bus route, basically, because that was, like, the most convenient bus route for me. And Waterstones Covent Garden, mainly I think because I applied to it twice, because it had 3 entrances.
Yes, wrote to different addresses.
And there was Garrick Street and there was New Row, and I think I actually went in and because I didn't know the geography very well at that time, and applied to both ends. So I also had the reputation of being the most eccentric branch of Waterstones in the country.
Right.
See, Waterstones branches have various reputations. For example, Hampstead is famous for having the worst customers.
Yep.
Because they're all writers and they're all stropping. They want to know why their books aren't face out, which I completely understand. But that's the trouble also with being a writer and growing up in my neck of the woods, is that you go out to your local bookshop and you go, "Hi, you promote me. I'm a local author," and they point at Sam and Rusty, and all the other ones, Sebastian Fuchs. You think, can't they go and live in the countryside somewhere?
Yes. What got you into writing the Rivers of London series? Desperation.
I was going bankrupt. You cannot live on a retail wage and live in central London with a kid.
Yeah.
You go bankrupt fairly quickly. There's just too much of a gap between unless you have a council house, and I didn't have a council house, so I was going steadily bankrupt, and it was the second year I was in Waterstones, and I was shelving people that I hadn't shelved before, and I realised that all these new people I was shelving had actually been published that year for the first time. They were all debut authors, and I thought, hurrah, it must be really easy to get a book published if all these people can do it. That touch of arrogance I had right at the beginning is still with me, to be honest. Or at least much easier than television. And you see, the thing is, I only have one talent. Right, and that is writing. That is my one talent. So that either pays its way, or I'm going bankrupt. So I decided to write a book, and I sort of pulled up projects and TV ideas and book projects ideas, including one which was called The Nerd, which would have been a nerd detective, which I like. I still one day will write because he's hilarious. Except the technology just keeps changing so fast, and there's too many people that know it much better than me that I decided, no, I'm not going to do that because... Yeah. Not until I can hire someone as a consultant to do the hacking, because it would have been just, oh, look at the hacking in there, it's so funny. So I thought, right, I'll do this one, which was a police fantasy, and it was called Magic Cops in my head for the longest time. And I thought, right, I'll do that. And then I did it, and then I sold it. And when I mean, Peter Grant turned up, and I wrote the first 6 pages, and I realised that I had something hot. And I went, right, this will sell. So then I knew it was just a question of finishing it. So I did the whole thing where you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and slog out 2 hours of work, powered entirely by desperation and coffee. And but I knew it was. I knew it would sell. I knew it would go past the gatekeepers. I mean, I didn't know it was going to sell, but I knew it would get past the gatekeepers. So I knew I would get an agent with it, and I knew I could. Once I had an agent could sell it because it was just the right stuff. And then it gets sold, and they did like a ridiculously short run, like 1,500. So it was not a big run of hardback. I was amazed they did a hardback at all, to be totally honest. And we all sat down to like a career as a middle-list author. That was what I was going to be. I was going to help pay my mortgage. I wasn't going to give up my day job because that's silly, which is something I've done 6 times, give up the day job. So but on the 7th time, I was sure I wasn't going to give up the day job because, after making that mistake 6 times, probably not a good idea to do it again.
You're running out of Waterstones.
Yeah, and also I figured I wasn't going to get another go at anyone. No one else was going to employ me. So... and then the book was just hit. So I don't know. I think it just was. You never know why people buy books, right? You never know if your book is going to be successful. You know if it's good, but you don't know if it's going to sell, like to an audience, because the audience makes up its mind what it likes. You can hype something. You can create a temporary blip, and you can create interest. And literary fiction basically subsists on creating a kind of artificial market. But if you're writing proper commercial fiction, or proper fiction that people are actually going to read and not just put on their tables so that people think they're brainy, then you have to actually sell to people. You have to write something that people want to read. Yeah. And so therefore, no one was more surprised than all of us. Like everyone was like gobsmacked. They had to do an emergency reprint, and it was like, oh, it's selling really well. And it was like, oh my god, people actually like this book. And Gallant started taking me to nicer restaurants and things like that, and it's been getting better and better ever since, really. Yeah. I don't even feel it will stop at some point.
Did you, when you started writing the first one, did you have in mind a series?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm an experienced writer. I'd already done 20 years of writing by that point, and I knew what they were looking for. They like series. You were more likely to sell a book if you go and say it's the first one, and here are the outlines. I had outlines for the next 2 books. Right. They actually turned out not to be the outlines for the next 2 books, but I had outlines to convince them that they were going to be the next 2 books, and. They like that because they've got to make money too, and they like a series. They like a good series. You have to hand in something very special to sell a standalone, and so a series is always good. The potential for a series doesn't actually have to be a series, or it doesn't even have to be like a continuous series, like a Game of Thrones kind of series. It just has to be that there's a potential for you to carry on the franchise, if you see what I mean. So you can do something like Louis McMaster Bujold does in The Curse of Chalian, which is actually do a book in the same world but from a different character's point of view, and things like that. But you must open that possibility. They feel much more comfortable and are much more likely to buy your work.
Now, your latest book, which you said is a novella, The Furthest Station, that is actually between the
Foxglove Summer and the Hanging Tree. Unless it's between the Hanging Tree and no, it's definitely Fox. I have a spreadsheet.
Yes. It's between 5 and 6, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Is it? Someone's got a website somewhere. I've got it on my website as well. I don't see why I'm expected to remember these things.
Well, I was going to ask you, why that? And I was also going to ask you about, because you've also got the graphic novel collaborations with David
Also,
Carpenter.
interstitial is a good word in there. I got that from
Interstitial,
Doctor Who.
right.
Interstitial, by the way.
But how do they all fit into it? Because
Well,
are you aiming at a different audience with that?
No, I'm aiming. I don't aim at an audience.
Right.
My lesson I learned from my initial success was don't fucking bother aiming for an audience. You have no idea who's going to buy your books. So from now on, I just write them and I sell them.
Right.
I don't aim at an audience. That's not my job. In fact, it's not really the author's job. It's the publisher's job to aim at an audience.
Yeah.
Right, to think about those sorts of things. As an author, you write the book that you want to write, and then you hope that somebody else will buy it. Right? And all really publishers ask from you is that they want to like your book too. Mm-hmm. If you're dealing with publishers, and agents, they read ridiculous numbers of manuscripts, and they really want to pick up a book and go through like the first 3 pages and go, oh my God, I'm enjoying this. I'm sitting on because they're reading them on a Kindle on the train back to some godforsaken suburb, going, I don't want to read this like yet another, present tense YA story about a girl overcoming her odds to become a monster hunter or something, and that's quite good. And then they pick up something that like suddenly goes, wow, comes off the page in the first couple of pages. Then they're very happy to see it, and then they will worry about who will buy it. Mm-hmm. They will make that decision at the time on what the cover will be, and they will make all the wrong decisions because no one knows anything. It's like filmmaking; no one really knows anything, and then they will go out, and then the audience will decide whether they like it or not. Mm-hmm. It's especially true. That's why I'd never write YAs, because they are the pickiest bloody audience in the entire world. They absolutely will not. But you can hype to the gills anything you like, but they will not buy it. They will not buy it if they don't like it. And if they like it, they will ignore everything else. Harry Potter didn't get big because of hype. Harry Potter got big because of kids passing Harry Potter to other kids in playgrounds and saying, oh, this is really good, you must read it. It wasn't big because parents did that. It was good because kids did that. And a kid's recommendation they've measured this by measuring the speed at which games can go up and down the country, can get from one end of the country in less than a week. Mm-hmm. And when and that is like true word of mouth. The kids market works entirely on word of mouth. So there's no hyping, there's no Guardian reviews. You just go. And I'm quite fatalistic about it. You write the book that you want to write, because that will be the best book that you can possibly write. Okay, and then you listen to your editor.
Rather than writing a book you think.
Yeah, you can't write because you can't even anticipate what your editor's going to want, let alone what the audience is going to want. So you write the book you want, and then you listen to your editor if they've got some experience and you agree with them, but you don't listen to them if you don't. Mm-hmm. And they will decide whether that's like to kick you out or not. I mean, you kind of negotiate these things.
Yeah.
But when you start off, you're a minnow. And so therefore you have to listen to what people say, and then if you're really successful, nothing succeeds like success, and then you get to say, I say different, and they have to argue with you, and it's sort of like the boots on the other foot. But everyone basically wants the same thing. They want a book that they like. They want to sell something that they enjoy. Booksellers enjoy selling books that they like. Publishers enjoy publishing books that they like. Editors enjoy editing books that they like. Everyone wants a book that they like because it's a pain to edit something you don't like, just as much as it's a pain to read something you don't like. And that's why I've got quite a lot of time for professional critics, while ignoring everything they say. But they have to read these books that they don't like, and they might write interestingly scathing things about it. And I think we all live in the shadow of Clive James, really, in that respect. He was just the best possible guy for that on television. Occasionally, you can get the collection of his collected reviews as the Crystal Bucket, and they are the best reviews of television ever written, ever, and they are funny. And they are funny to me now, even when I can't even remember the programs he's reviewing. In the 70s, this was.
Yeah.
And I completely can't remember what the topic of this conversation was.
Well, you were expressing your admiration, although you don't believe anything they say, of critics.
Well, you shouldn't. No, you see, because you are the arbiter of your own taste. You are the arbiter of your own talent, and ultimately you're the arbiter of your own work. Mm-hmm. Right? You must learn to edit your work to a certain extent. You must learn. You must stop. You must step through the kind of portal of, yeah, I'm a genius, right? And you must look critically at your own work and say, I will change it. Not because somebody else will want it different. Not because someone will go, I don't like the present tense past participle. No, you must look at your own work and say, does this work as work for me? Right? And it must be the best thing you can do. It must be the best work of craft that you can do when you hand it on to your editor. Right? It should be the best work of craft you could do. Now, it isn't going to be, because the first draft is always a bugger, and you always sit there thinking, I am never going to look at this piece of work again in my entire life. My mind is going, get away from me. And people say, how's it going? I don't know. I throw it across the room. But what you have to do is you have to come back to it if you have time, and you have to look at it again, and you then have to be objective about it. Yeah. But you have to be objective, framed in your terms, not framed in other. You can't frame your objectivity in other people's terms. That makes no sense as a sentence whatsoever. But yeah, but you see what I mean. So yeah, it's very important to write what you like, what you want to read, and then hope that somebody else likes it. And that's all you can do. That is your only choice. There are people out there who have tried to game the system, and they can't game it. You see, Patterson doesn't have his vast army of writers. He's not getting away with it because he cynically markets his stuff, which he does do now. I mean, Patterson will literally go and say, what's written in London? I will get a London writer, and then I'll write something set in London with my name on it and written by this guy, and we will then get the London market. He got it because these first sets of books were really good, and we now trust him to deliver, a collection of what we like out of a Patterson book. We will get out of a Patterson book. Mm-hmm. See? Yeah. So you can be cynical, but you can only be cynical in a kind of honest way.
Yeah. How long did the first book take you to write, in terms of reviewing it and rewriting it?
It took about, in total it took about a year. The actual writing was about 4 months. I was full-time work at the time, so 4 or 5 months. Went out to beta readers, it went out to my friends, one of whom made a very important suggestion that later became the scene where the boat goes under the water. Mm-hmm. It came back. I sold it to my agent. My agent then said, "Okay, I'll flog it to this lot," and then he put it out. I can't remember. There was a certain amount of auction going on, which was quite nice, and then Gallant's bought it, and Joe Fletcher, who then immediately left. I don't know. I have this effect on people, I think. So he started my bye. He's like, no, editor number 2. Now I'm my third editor, It's terrible. Soon it might be, they're just so flimsy these days, editors. You need robust editors of the past. I think what it is they no longer go for lunch and don't come back. Yes. See, in the old days, they used to go and get Blotto at lunch, and I think that used to get them through the process of being an editor. I think they could face a morning with working through people's manuscripts in the assumption they would spend the entire afternoon completely pissed out of their brains. But alas, those days are gone, and they all work in open plan offices now, and it's not they can't get quietly drunk even at the office. I'm trying to encourage them. I send them alcohol on a regular basis. What was I talking about? Editors.
And how long the first book was?
And then it took about another year to sell.
Yeah.
And then another year production, and then it came out. So, but total about 3 years from I shall write a book to I have sold a book.
One of the things that intrigues me about them, you're set it in police procedural territory, and you have it very much up to date. So you've got Peter Grant sometimes having to do health and safety risk assessments,
very important,
dealing with ghosts and stuff. But it's a wonderful reflection of modern life. But you've got an interesting ethnic makeup of some of your characters. I mean, Peter Grant describes himself as being between IC3 and IC6.
No, he describes himself as being would be registered by an outside observer as between IC3 and IC7, depending on whether he's got a suntan or not.
Yes. But you've also got Sarah Gillies.
IC7, by the way, is that orange tan that people get when they use too much tanning salute, if you're wondering.
TV celebrity colour.
TV celebrity colour is IC7.
Right. But you've also got Sarah Gulid, and you've got Sarah, and Abdul Haq Walid.
Yes.
Which is sort of intriguing, because the time you were writing this, it was not long after the Metropolitan Police was being described as being suffering from institutional racism.
Actually, it was 11 years after that.
It was 11 years.
Yeah, first one was 98, 99.
But it's still relatively recent, and it...
Well, the one thing, publishing can't cast aspersions on anybody for its ethnic inclusivity, so neither can actually any of the professions, so...
Yeah. No, it just seems intriguing that the Met that's got this reputation, had this reputation, certainly, of being, and you've not only got people of colour in there, but you've also got them dealing with supernatural entities. Is that sort of having a bit of a laugh at the Met's expense?
No, it comes from growing up in London.
Yeah.
It never. You see, there's a big difference between writing a book and television. There's television, they were always taking my black characters out and saying things like, "Oh, this is too much like the United Nations," you see, and especially if they were like educated at Trinity and from somewhere leafy and white, and they would say things, "Oh no, it's too much like the United Nations, or there's too many black people." I remember one time, it was Alan Yentob. I think it was Alan Yentob went on television and said, we would have more black characters if the writers wrote them. And this was like 2 weeks after someone had deliberately eliminated a couple from my script. And, I've never actually wanted to throw television out of a window before, but that came very close. The only thing that stopped me is it wasn't my television. And so I'd had to have bought somebody else a television. And so when I came to write a novel, I basically was just doing what I had always... it's not even I planned it. It's just I grew up in a mixed area, went to a mixed school. I had mixed friends. The first all-white environment I ever worked in was the BBC. That was the first time I ever went into anywhere where you walked in and there were no black people, except in the canteen and guarding the door. And it's still the same. I go into Carmelite House and it's like, yay, hi Bob. And it's land of whiteness. Yay! Land of whiteness. But this is I'm being unfair to the publishing industry. This is true of barristers, this is true of everyone. See, the dichotomy of London is it's full of these organisations, right, that are essentially run by people white people who are not from London.
Yeah.
They're all, if you look at them, it is all people who are from outside London, who come to London for these careers and run these organisations. If you're a Londoner, your ethnic background, your ethnic kind of mix, especially if you're a central Londoner like me, your ethnic background has been completely different. You've grown up, you went to a completely different kind of school, went to a completely different background in terms of so it's totally normal for me. It would be really weird for me to write something where everyone was white, unless I did that on purpose. I would have to do that on purpose rather than the other way around. So when people say, there's lots of diversity, for me, it's not. It's normal. I put normalcy in.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
I put normalcy for me, my normalcy in.
Right, yeah.
Okay, which is interpreted as diversity by other people, which is fine. I don't mind that. But the people go, why did you make Peter black? There was no point where Peter Grant was a white guy. There was no point where Peter Grant... In the same way that Dr. Walid just turned up for that page. If you get to the page where Dr. Walid turns up, he didn't exist until that page in my head. And I thought, oh God, I need a guy. And then suddenly this Scottish, gingery Scot, who was a Muslim, appeared with his backstory of coming from the Highlands. He had a Highland accent and his parents were all Calvinists and he'd converted at Edinburgh University while taking his medical degree. And it was like, wow, quick, writing while it's hot. And that was it. That's why he's not in the first... Also, if I was to go back and rewrite the book, Wally would have been in the first scene where Peter does the thing with the body, which is what happens now. When we were going through it for potential script ideas, I was looking through the structure and I went, why the fuck is Wally not in the pathology lab at that point? Why does he go? And it's because I hadn't thought of him until he turned up, and then he just arrived. The same with Sahagulid. I wanted a description of it. DC had to go down with Peter and down the stairs, right? And I thought, so DC going, no, okay, go in a hijab. Somali gun in a hijab, right? And a leather jacket. And then she just went Muslim, and I was stuck with her. Most of the characters that I keep have some great opening line, and then I'm stuck with them. And that was it, like Muslim Ninja. That was Khalid's. Zach, give me 30 seconds to hide my stash. Beverly's T-shirt, we run Tings, Tings don't run we. And I'm to the point where I'm getting very cautious about people opening doors in my book, because it's like they open the door and then I'm stuck with them for the rest of the series. So it's like, I'm not going to give you a name, because if I don't give you a name, I won't be stuck with you. And even then they come back. Is that 5 minutes?
Right. Ooh.
I told you I could ramble. You didn't believe me. I said, don't worry about filling the time.
Let's just quickly fast forward to the last question before I throw it open to the audience. Your other Doctor Who series, Battlefield, and obviously in the Rivers series, you've got a lot of Celtic, Dark Age, pagan-y legend myth in there. Is that something you've got a fascination for?
I'm very, very non-Celtic. Mainly because it's so fashionable. So I'm very anti kind of Celtic. The Celtic doesn't exist, I mean, from an archaeological point of view, Celtic doesn't exist. I will take my stuff from anywhere. I'm not fussy. I did Arthurian for Battlefield because I thought, yay, they're digging up Arthur. And then you do the research, and it's a lot of Celtic Dark Ages, which you're not allowed to call sub-Roman period stuff. And you do the mythology of Britain. There's a lot of sub-Roman Celtic, well, what's known as Celtic, which isn't actually Celtic, mythology in Britain as well. So, it's not really that difficult to see where they came from.
No, it's just intriguing that you got them in.
It's not intriguing. It's because I'm lazy and will reuse material whenever possible. I'd love to describe it as a thematic obsession, but there you go.
Right. Let's. Any questions from the audience? Lady over there.
So I was wondering how important place was to you when you kind of pictured the novels in your life.
Well, place is very important. I mean, because I'm one of those people that are like, oh, did you go down that street or that street? I hate it in chases or films where they suddenly magically appear 20 miles away, and you go, that's not possible. I tend to go out and do the chase in my head. Like I went to for the second book, I went to the Trocadero Centre and recreated the chase and where he would go and where thought, well, she'll hide up there and then come down here and he'll come down. Kind of looked out the thing, what would be the worst that can happen? And wow, she goes down there and all that kind of stuff. So I do that, and then there's a lot of Google Earth, which is very handy for reminding yourself where you are. I find it you have to go there at least once to kind of like smell it. But now that the kind of real time has moved ahead of the times, because the latest book is actually the one I'm writing now, is set in 2015. And I don't know if you go to London, right, they're just constantly rebuilding it under your feet. So Google Earth is becoming very useful for working out whether actually a building was there in 2015, because you can look at it and go, oh, well, he ran into that building, and then I don't know if you know, you can go backwards in time on Street View now. You go backwards in time on Street View and you find that building was not there in 2015. And you think, why am I doing this? Because no one's going to notice, right? Once you start decided you're going to be precise about that sort of thing, you have to be precise about that sort of thing. But also, as a policeman, because it's from Peter's point of view, as a policeman, Peter is thinking, I am going down this street, I am turning left down that street, because he's used to having to give directions. He's used to putting onto his airwave and telling people where he is. He's got to be able to tell people where he is. It's just for safety, if nothing else, but also to coordinate a chase or something. He has to be able to tell his superiors where he is or coordinate where he is. So he's used to thinking, and then he has to put it in his notebook, and he has to bring it up when he does a statement. He can't just go, "I wandered down a valley down northwards, my lord."
Yeah.
You know, he has to be able to say, "I went down, Broadchurch Street, and there was this Scottish guy."
Another question?
I was just going to ask, have you any one piece of essential advice for any aspiring writers?
I think I covered it. Yeah, write the book you want to write, and you might not sell it. Right, this is the horrible thing. There is no universal right to be published. Right, there is no and even if you're published, as many publishers will tell you, there is no universal right to be read by anyone apart from your publisher and your mother. Right, and in my case, not even my mother. Right, and and so there is no universal right. So you can only do what you want to do. And for me, I don't know about other people, I never sat down and thought, I am going to write because I want to please other people. I always sat down and write because I thought, I didn't like that book. I want to write one that I like. I want a story that I want to read. I want to do something like this. This is what I want to do. What you can do, though, is get a book called How Not to Write a Novel by Howard Mittlemark and I think somebody else, which is the best single condensed wisdom on what to avoid if you want to get published, basically. And it's a very good book because if you got 4 or 5 writers and ask their advice on how to write a novel, you'll get about 16 answers, right, and a fight. But if you put 5 to 6 published authors in a room and you threaten to leave them there until they came